Anytime you hear somebody claim that all sugar is bad, it's not even true. It depends again on where that sugar came from and its biochemical complexity. Because again, I would put up the polysaccharides, the complex sugars from aloe vera and rice bran against basically anything else that I'm aware of that Mother Nature provides for us for any type of a health promoting benefit.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who is out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode.
Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. My name is Bob Nickman. My guest today is Dr. John Lewis, and we're going to be talking about nutrition, dietary supplementation, and polysaccharides. If you thought all sugar was bad for you, you need to listen to this episode. Dr. Lewis explains what polysaccharides are, how they can benefit our health, and the decades of research he has done on this topic. He's a widely published researcher who has started a supplementation business. We're going to talk about the relationship between nutrition and chronic disease, brain health, all the things that increase vitality and longevity. He is a font of knowledge. I enjoyed talking to him thoroughly, and I plan to have him on for another episode in the future. So let's jump into it. Here he is. This is Dr. John Lewis. John Lewis in Miami, Bob Nickman here in Los Angeles, and we're going to be talking about nutrition, supplementation, exercise, all the wonderful things that make for a healthy life. Glad you're here.
Thank you, Bob, for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
I'm going to start with a question that I always have about supplementation. Okay, two things. A lot of people say, some people say, well, if you eat properly, you don't need supplementation. I don't agree with that because I think that probably the soil and the water is not what it used to be. And maybe that's just not, and also there's sort of genetic predispositions and with people. So, I'm a fan of supplementation. I feel better when I take the right supplements. That's my take. And I'm probably yours because you're in that business.
Yes. If that was your first question, yes, I'll be happy to respond to that.
Yeah. Well, I guess it wasn't really a question. It was more of a statement,
okay.
But talk about it. Let's go. Let's go, John.
I totally agree with your rationale. The food is now not what it was 100 years ago. So you have all this pollution and contamination in the soil, air, and water that our ancestors, even up to 100 years ago, didn't deal with. We now have all these chemicals floating around that do, unfortunately, deleterious things to us, even though on the one hand, they've been beneficial for some things, but on the other, they cause us problems. And so it's very easy to argue that the food quality today is not what it was. But even beyond that, in the area where my colleagues and I spent so much of our time conducting research on these polysaccharides, Bob, these are things that the average person does not get in food. So, for example, do you know anyone who eats aloe vera? I don't.
No.
People use aloe vera gel if they have a sunburn or a cut or a wound or something, but no one eats aloe vera gel. I mean, we have aloe vera growing in our backyard, but I'm not out there snipping leaves off every day, sucking down the gel to get my polysaccharide. That, in fact, that's a waste of time anyway, because the gel is 99% water. And so you have all of that dilution of the polysaccharide. You couldn't possibly, I don't know, bucket loads, Home Depot, five gallon bucket loads of that gel.
Mm-hmm.
To try to get, a tiny little bit of polysaccharide. We've done all that hard work for people. So that's one example of where, even though Mother Nature provides us this incredible plant, if you only use it, just the way Mother Nature provides it, then it's a bit limited. Another great example is turmeric. So the turmeric root, obviously turmeric has been used in India, Pakistan, all that, that whole part of the world for millennia, and mostly in food. I guess it's part of it's not, I guess, it is part of Ayurveda, that whole philosophy of medicine of that part of Asia. But turmeric is very rapidly metabolized and broken down by the liver if you just take it in raw powder form. And it's also the curcuminoid, which is considered to be, and this isn't my opinion, this is backed up by all these studies that you can read and look up on PubMed. The curcuminoids are the most bioactive components of the turmeric root. So it's a root that grows, like ginger and lots of other roots that humans eat. All of that material beyond the curcuminoids has not been demonstrated in any meaningful way to have health promoting benefits. The curcuminoids only make up 1, 2, 3% of that root of any given volume of the root. So you have all of this extra material, and then you have this tiny little amount of curcuminoid, kind of analogous to the polysaccharide in aloe vera gel. So you eat some of that powder, like in a curry or something. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Gosh, I love the taste of curry. But the reality is you're getting just a tiny, tiny little bit of curcuminoid. And then even if you eat it that way, again, the liver breaks that stuff down so rapidly that it doesn't even have, most of it doesn't even have a chance to get into the bloodstream to then go to the cells to actually do something health promoting. In fact, the bioavailability and the absorption of curcumin has typically been shown to be like 3% maybe. So in other words, 97% of that material, again, gets rapidly broken down and metabolized, and then you poop it out and you don't get any benefit from that. So you might get a tiny little bit of benefit of any given amount of turmeric root powder, just the raw powder. So if you take curcumin, you extract it out, just like you take the polysaccharide out of all that water in the aloe vera gel, take the curcuminoids out of that turmeric powder, then put them in a liposome or a micelle, which are nanoparticles that encapsulate. You can just analogously think of them as like a circle. You have that phospholipid or fatty layer on the outside, and then you have your active ingredient on the inside, not just for curcumin. Lots of active ingredients are utilized this way, but you put them in that liposomal or micelle shell, and then that shell protects the active ingredient, in this case curcumin, to allow it to get through the gut and then get into the bloodstream and then go out to the target cells to do their job. So those are two examples that I like to use when people make this argument about, oh no, dietary supplements are garbage, it's a waste of money. You have expensive pee in your poop, blah, 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 blah. You hear all these things. Oh, supplements are not regulated. That's nonsense too. If you want to go down that road, I can completely debunk that. I mean, there are lots of different things that, people hear, but it doesn't, just because you've heard something by some unqualified expert on the internet doesn't necessarily mean that he or she knows what the heck he's talking about. The sad thing is that these polysaccharides from aloe vera and curcumin are actually very, very health promoting. Like, you can get so much benefit from them if you take them. But again, you're not going to get them from food. You really need a good high quality dietary supplement to get ingredients like those.
Can you explain what a polysaccharide is? When I hear a long word like that, all I hear is the word saccharin, which was an artificial sweetener my dad put in his coffee. That's all I know.
Right. I'd be happy to. So,
yeah.
And I'm glad you've asked this question, because it is very important. So, as you know, we as Americans, for the last 50 years, maybe even longer, anytime we hear the word sugar, we immediately think what? Bad. Right? Mm-hmm. Like there's no possibility any sugar could actually be good for us. Bob, that is completely, patently false. And I'll tell you why. Because sugars, and I'm going to get around to answering what a polysaccharide here is in just a moment, but I'm putting the context in here properly. Sugars are dependent on two primary characteristics to determine goodness or badness. Number one is their source. So what does a sugar come from? So you have a monosaccharide, a simple sugar, like high fructose corn syrup. We can all agree that if you're consuming high fructose corn syrup every day, it's going to spike your insulin, spike your glucose, set you up for a lot of bad problems in life: diabetes, cancer, heart disease, the whole nine yards. It's pretty clear. And to me, it's criminal that we allow Coca-Cola and all these big companies to continue shoveling high fructose corn syrup down unsuspecting people's mouths. But yet part of that problem is people are, they're just drinking their soda or eating whatever snacks that are loaded with this crap, and they're not questioning it. They're not even questioning, well, what am I doing to myself? But that's another story. Second, you have disaccharides. And oh, by the way, I didn't break the root down for you. Mono, single, one, saccharide, sugar. So if you look at the two roots of that word, monosaccharide, one, sugar. Disaccharide, Di2, saccharide, sugar, two sugar molecules linked together. What's the most common form of a disaccharide? A sucrose, sugar, white table sugar. Again, if you're eating white table sugar every single day, it's probably not the best thing for you to be doing. And that comes from cane sugar. And then finally, the most complex sugars, polysaccharides, many saccharide sugars, many sugars. Bob, these complex sugars that my colleagues and I have studied for the last 20 years or so, from aloe vera and rice bran, I would argue are the most beneficial natural compounds that Mother Nature provides to us from these two plants compared to anything else. I'd put probably turmeric up there pretty close, maybe on the same level even, but these complex these complex sugars, these polysaccharides are so dense with information. They are literally hundreds of glucose units attached together with these glycosidic bonds. They are so complex, you cannot even draw them on a piece of paper. They're like 5D objects. And so they have been shown to be utilized by every cell in our body. There are things called organelles in every cell. And probably most people have heard of the mitochondria because it gets a lot of popularity in the press, being basically the motor of the cell. But you have other things like the endoplasmic reticulum, the Golgi, the cytoplasm, the nucleus. You have all these other components to every cell. And what happens between the endoplasmic reticulum and the Golgi when it's attaching different things together to either talk to another cell, replicate itself, create some sort of a bioactive compound like a protein or a cytokine or a growth factor, all these different things, it needs those polysaccharides in that process. They are just as important as any other material, whether it's a vitamin, a mineral. Of course, we know that oxygen is our first nutrient. We cannot survive for more than a couple of minutes without oxygen. But beyond oxygen, then you need vitamins, minerals, elements, fatty acids, amino acids, these polysaccharides. There's a big soup that goes into how we function at literally every single cellular or every single cell in our body. And the genes, by the way, you mentioned something about genetic predisposition just a moment ago. The genes actually don't do anything until they receive information from the environment. The best analogy for a gene is that it's kind of like a gun that's not loaded yet. The gun, if an unloaded gun is sitting there, it can't do anything, but once you put ammo in it and pull the trigger, now it can do something. Same thing with our genes. Our genes are just basically sitting there waiting for information that they receive from the environment. And what's the most profound way that they receive that information? It's every time we bend our elbow, open our mouth, and stick something in it. Mm-hmm. That is the most significant opportunity to influence whatever your genes are doing on a daily basis. So circling all the way back to these polysaccharides, because they have so much coded information in them compared to even amino acids, we are protein fanatics in this country. We think protein is the god of nutrition. And I could argue about some stuff about that too, if you like. But amino acids, fatty acids, vitamins, minerals, elements, all these other things pale in comparison to the amount of coded information in these polysaccharides because of their complexity and their structure. And our genes interpret that information that they receive. And I'm talking specifically about these ones from aloe vera and rice bran. There are lots of other plants in the plant kingdom that have polysaccharides in them, but I don't claim to be very knowledgeable about a lot of those, like mushrooms and seaweed and things like that. But these two particular that we've studied, my colleagues and I, we've shown time and time again in all the papers we've published, even though I'm not in academics anymore, but all the papers we've published over my scientific career have showed extraordinary effects in response to taking these polysaccharides. So that's a very long-winded answer to say that for you and your listeners, please, and me as a scientist, as an author, as somebody very particular about the language, anytime you hear somebody claim that all sugar is bad, it's not even true. It depends again on where that sugar came from and its biochemical complexity. Because again, I would put up the polysaccharides, the complex sugars from aloe vera and rice bran against basically anything else that I'm aware of that Mother Nature provides for us for any type of a health promoting benefits. Just please be mindful of the fact that don't succumb to the whatever this is for the last 50 years. It's nonsense to say that all sugar is bad for us. That's the bottom line.
Well, that's an interesting idea in a lot of areas of oversimplification of things. It's a great way to sell or not sell something. And, you see it in all fields, not just the health field, but you see it in politics, you see it in business. Here's the simple thing. It's good for you or it's bad for you. And there's a tendency to go, oh, good. Now it's been simplified for me. And,
that's right.
Yeah. And that's why we have people like you who have done tons of research, and because I'm not going to do the research. That's not who I am.
Touche.
No, but we need people to be in these specific disciplines in order to get the information. So, a big applause to you for, loving doing that. And then now you've taken that in from, the research realm into actual products and science, which let's talk about some of the products that your company does, because, here's my other question. I don't know exactly all the time. It's a little bit of an experiment. What do I take? What supplements do I take? How much do I take it? Is this real? Is it something that's just going on in my head? I think I feel better. And I'm somebody that, has spent a lot of years trying different things to see what works and what doesn't. I'm a little bit of a test tube myself in as many areas as I can be. Well, I hear, oh yeah, lion's mane helps your brain.
Right.
It's a mushroom, or creatine is good before you do a workout. There's a lot of, these are just two things, and my wife studies this stuff too. And I'm like, she goes, oh, we got to try this. We got to try this. And I'm like, I don't really want to try a bunch of stuff. I want to simplify it. Again, I like the simple thing, but I do several things based on, issues that I might have, physical issues. And so, how does somebody, and I've asked this for a number of people. I've never really gotten a completely satisfactory answer because I think it's a little amorphous, How do you decide? How do you know?
It's a great question. I'm not surprised you've gotten amorphous answers. You might think mine is as well, but I'm going to give it my best shot. So, number one, PubMed, the National Institute of the Library of Medicine. PubMed is the gold standard for the clearinghouse of scientific information, right? I mean, and it's free. Now, not every single article is freely available in terms of the whole article's contents, but you can at least read the abstract. And a lot of things are free now. I mean, finally, the government actually did one thing correct, and that was any research that's funded by the government has to be, the article that comes out of that research has to be freely available to the public. So that was, I'll give the government, I mean, they get nothing right 99% of the time, but at least, in this case, they got one thing right. So if it was an article from a study published, again, by any branch of the government, it will be freely available. And there are lots of other articles that are freely available as well. I mean, our articles, depending on the journal that you use, and in many cases, a lot of the journals that we've published in, they will make their articles freely accessible as well. And I think that's very important, because if you've just kept everything, sort of behind that wall, then the average Joe has no idea that it's even available. But anyway, I would encourage all of you and all of your listeners, go to PubMed. If you've read an article or you've seen something on TV or social media and somebody's touting the next greatest nutrient or vitamin or mineral, and I do the same. I mean, I go to PubMed anytime I'm researching a topic. I go to PubMed and I see actually what has been published on that particular nutrient, material, compound, whatever. So that's number one. And then even going deeper into that is look at how much information has been published on cells versus tissues versus animals versus humans, because a lot of times, unfortunately, unscrupulous marketers will take a study on cells or mice or rats, and then they will turn that into the greatest marketing message you've ever heard, but you can't find one study in humans. So what does that even mean? Like, it's easy. It's so easy. And with all due respect to my basic scientist friends, those are people that study cells, tissues, and animals. They create studies in the most perfect environment. So, it's easy to look at a petri dish of cells and add a material to it. And then, your whatever your time frame is that you're looking for, and then you stop the experiment and then you see what happened. It's a completely perfectly controlled condition and environment. There's no error there. It is what it is. And then you can say, okay, I did this, I used this subject material, and here's my outcome, period. And that's it. But what the heck does that mean when it comes to a human being actually putting that same material in his or her mouth and then seeing how that affects this thing, this entire system that's this machine, that we call our body? How in the world can you translate something that happened in a petri dish to something that happens in humans? Same thing for any of these, lower animal studies like mice and rats and rabbits. I mean, yeah, they're all mammals, but you still don't know at the end of the day because they have different, even a rat has no gallbladder. So think about that for a second. So there are all these different questions that you should ask very critically. If the only information you can find on PubMed is that, it's research based on cells or tissues or animals, well, my goodness, how in the world does that translate to humans? So I would be pretty skeptical of hearing a big, wonderful sounding marketing message that was completely around, we call it basic research. You have basic research on cells, tissues, and animals, and then you have clinical research on humans. So that's the distinction between those two. So that would be another thing that I would look for. Third, I would look for, does the company itself, maybe they're promoting a blend, or maybe they're promoting, something that it sounds good in theory, but you're still, a little skeptical or you're unsure. So did they actually publish any research around that particular blend or formula or whatever? To me, that's also a big deal. Look at products and specific products. You mentioned lion's mane. So we actually have written a few review papers over the last couple of years. And in one of them, we wrote a section on lion's mane and cognitive function. Well, if the research says that in the tests that were conducted, that 500 milligrams was the amount needed to create an effect, and you're buying a product that maybe only has 100 milligrams per serving, then that means you need to take, if that was in a capsule or a tablet or a powder or whatever, then be mindful of the fact that, it may be marketed in a dose for one particular serving that may not necessarily match the amount of material that you need to then try to match or correlate with what the research shows. So that may mean you need to purchase more product to always get the same amount in the dose that's required to then be consistent with what's showed in the research. Now,
that's money would be the factor in
that's right, exactly.
Too low of a dose,
I was going to, and that you just read my mind.
Yeah. So I get, of course.
So I was going to say, take that to the financial step, like you just said. And then you have, of course, look at the company itself. I mean, I consider myself not to be a marketer. I'm kind of a marketer by default at this point, but I'm really a scientist at heart who has spent 20 years. I mean, it's even kind of still going, even though I'm not full-time in academics anymore, but I'm somebody that is trying to do it the right way, in the sense of I spent all of this time in the trenches, conducting all of this research. And then I said, wow, we've got some incredible discoveries here. I got burned out on academics. If you want to hear that story, we can go down that road. But I took that information and then I created a product, and now we're coming out with a couple more products based on all of that research. So, on that level, do your homework. For anyone out there who's confused or who's concerned about a company's reputation, I would say, well, try to do the best you can on the homework of that company. I mean, there are a lot of good companies out there, and I've worked with them in my career: Standard Process, Life Extension, Biotics, Premier Research Labs. Those were some of the companies that funded little studies with my group when I was still full-time in academics. And they are companies doing it the right way. They are putting their money where their mouth is. Most dietary supplement companies don't have the budget of the typical big pharma company. I mean, not even close, but at least, people complain, oh, well, there's no research done on this. Well, guess what? That's because the government has been completely compromised by big pharma. You have this incestuous relationship between big pharma and FDA. And so all this money, all these resources get contributed or directed, not contributed, but get directed to all this drug research at the expense of nutrition research. So there's no political environment or will or anything else to take all of our taxpayer funded money and make a big chunk of that go into nutrition and natural products. It all gets shifted to biotech, drugs, gene therapy, whatever. I haven't seen one politician even talking about that. Again, I'm giving you a very long-winded answer that it's not just saying one thing or another would guide your choice in buying a dietary supplement. Maybe one of the most basic things that I've overlooked in my answer so far is take something like your vitamin D level. Unfortunately, Bob, we know that 70% of Americans are either insufficient or deficient in their vitamin D status. Now, that's a shame because, first of all, we have 35, 40,000 genes. That number is not exactly known, but somewhere in that neighborhood, there's that many genes floating around in this thing we call a human. And vitamin D has already been shown to interact with over 4,500 of those genes. So this, and it's actually not even a vitamin, it's actually a prohormone. It's a very potent nutrient that we get from primarily the sun. That's our best source, the UVB radiation from sunlight. 70% of Americans are not even at a level where it would be promoting good health. And so get your vitamin D checked. I mean, get it checked at least once a year. The level that's supposed to be optimal is debatable. No, there's no great agreed upon consensus of what's optimal, but I try to always have mine at least above 50, and it always is. So I'm making sure that, here in Miami, I'm getting out in the sun as much as I can without roasting. I will take a supplement too, just to kind of give me an extra boost. And vitamin D is cheap. I mean, you don't have to break your bank to take a good D3 supplement. So D3 or OD25 is something we should all be checking at least once a year. You can check your vitamin B12 status. B12 is obviously a very important vitamin that you want to make sure you stay on top of. Iron is something else that you want to stay on top of. You can look at your different electrolytes. I mean, there are even now assays for omega-3 fatty acids that you can look at. I mean, not every single vitamin and mineral can be tested in a very, I would say, conclusive fashion, but at least in some of the big ones, just do a panel. Go to, hopefully people out there can find a good functional medicine, either physician or nurse practitioner, someone in that realm that can help you locate a good company that can do some testing for you, and then get that checked every once in a while. I mean, that would, and especially something like vitamin D. I mean, it's cheap. It's like $20 or $30 to get your level checked. And then if you're low, start taking it, or try to get out in the sun every day. I mean, gosh, get 10, 15, 20 minutes, take your shirt off and, allow your body to get exposed to as much sun as you can, as many days as you can, because that's a very important nutrient. And it's not just for our bone health. As I mentioned, it's interacting with 4,500 different genes. So it's literally affecting every major organ in our body. So it's a very long-winded answer to your question, but I think, again, it kind of depends on what you're looking for, what you feel, intuitively, what do you feel like you're deficient in or missing? And then going all the way back to the polysaccharides, there is no test, there's no assay to say, oh, you're deficient in polysaccharides. There's no such thing. But I can tell you, based on, again, not my opinion, but our published research, all the effects that we've shown, everything from lowering chronic inflammation to boosting overall immune system functioning, to increasing adult stem cell production, to balancing components of the immune system. I mean, gosh, Bob, there are a lot of amazing, incredible effects we've shown from our research that we've very conclusively published. And, anybody can take advantage of that. You don't have to end up having Alzheimer's or multiple sclerosis to wait to benefit from them. I mean, my view is prevention is just as important as treatment. So why in the world would you not put something like this that's not very expensive in your toolbox to help you prevent bad things from happening to you down the road in the first place?
I would say that prevention is more important than treatment, because you avoid treatment and you avoid the expense.
That's right.
That's interesting. You would talk about the sun. It's another thing that's been promoted as not so good. Too much sun. Well,
Right.
obviously you don't want to get burned. That's not something that, is intended. And I think the human body will tell you when you're getting too much sun, you feel it. But the idea, especially people working in sealed environments, in office buildings and artificial light and all that, to not go outside and be in the sun, I think there's probably a lot of people that don't do that, other than maybe some outdoor sports.
I totally agree with you.
My thing is, well, do you feel better when you're in the sun, when you've been in the sun, or do you feel worse? I always feel better. So, that's just a simple, intuitive sort of biological response to being in the sun. Taking my shoes off too, another good thing.
Right, grounding.
So, it's something in my mouth there. I don't know what that was. Maybe a polysaccharide came out of my tongue. So, we're such interesting creatures that way, that we're these, biological bags of whatever we are, these complicated things. And yet a lot of what progress, with the quotes around it, has told us is that we're not, or that we should move away from that. In a sense, it's it's an interesting thing that you're doing, because you're combining research and science with that aspect of the sort of natural state that we're born into, which gets pushed to the side a lot, particularly by what you were talking about, the pharmaceutical industry. This comes up a lot in this show because it does. It's very pervasive and when you talk about the how funds are funneled into different things, it literally makes no sense to me anyway not to have it in the nutrition area, which is the basic biological area of health.
How backward I was just going to say, if I may, to that point you just made, how backward is it that we call the National Complementary of Alternative Medicine, whatever that branch of the NIH is, nutrition gets funneled under something called alternative. Alternative to me is medication. Exactly to your point, nutrition, nutrients, physical activity, exercise, all these things are the foundation. They're not the alternative. And I saw a good picture somebody sent me the other day, something about if your physician tries to prescribe to you medication before asking you about your nutrition, your physical activity, your ability to manage stress, whether or not you're sleeping well, and a couple of other things, then you need to get another physician. Because if the only thing that person is thinking of is writing you a prescription without doing a more comprehensive assessment of your behavior to get to better understand and get to why you got to type 2 diabetes or hypertension or whatever in the first place, then you need to find another physician. And I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. Well, that unfortunately, that's, that's the model that's still being promoted in medical schools. It's gotten better, but not much. The AMA, so oversees all that stuff. It's a very antiquated kind of a process to go through medical school that way. It's and I understand there's a lot of information, but if you're teaching to something that was a model from decades and decades ago, without integrating the the newer sort of research that you're talking about, it seems it's a big ship to turn. I guess that's sort of the simple answer. It's a big ship to turn, and who's willing to do that? And where does money come into it? Which it comes into everything. So I mean, it's a tough one. And then the other side of it is on the nutritional side. It is on the A side more expensive to eat healthy and to get organic foods and to take healthy supplements. On the A side, it's more expensive. On the B side, it's a lot cheaper. You don't have the medical issues, and not to mention how bad you feel, but the expense of hospitals and treatments and all that kind of stuff. I guess if you knew that's what was going to happen because of your lifestyle, you might change that lifestyle. But a lot of people don't think about it. And I don't think you want to think about it in terms of necessarily fear, but just in terms of vitality.
If I may comment on that too, we've set the system up so that the cheaper alternative is based on all of this tax subsidy sort of. I mean, subsidy, I guess, is the best way to be polite about it, but we're subsidizing the people that grow beef, that grow dairy, wheat, corn, soy, all these commodity large crops. We subsidize all of these farmers. And that's the reason why all this crappy food like stuff, or even, your steak or your hamburger, I mean, whatever, all that stuff is so much cheaper because blueberries and strawberries and lettuce and tomatoes are not subsidized in the same way. So if we actually subsidize people to grow more healthy food, maybe we would have a reversal in that. And also to your point about people, unfortunately, I guess most people don't look at their health as what I would consider to be. I think we have two very special characteristics in this life. One is our time. We can't do anything about the passage of time. And two is our health, good or bad, but we can do it. I mean, unless you truly have Marfan syndrome or Down syndrome, some true genetic condition, then that's very unfortunate to have had that fate. But for all of the rest of us who are dealing with, I mean, again, type 2 diabetes to me is the most pathetic, because that truly is the canary in the coal mine that says, man, you didn't take care of yourself. I mean, nobody should end up with type 2 diabetes, or very rarely anyway. And so why are people not making their health their priority? You're running around and I guess you're trying to make a living and you're dealing with all of this stress and whatever from your work and your spouse and your children and your social media time. But it's just like the average person doesn't even prioritize his or her health. That's why we now have 75% of Americans who are either overweight or obese. And we've got, I think it's 20 something million people with type 2 diabetes, and then like another 80 to 90, maybe even 100 million people with metabolic syndrome, which is the stage prior to type 2 diabetes and other forms of heart disease. So we have a third of the country that's either type 2 diabetic or on the way to it.
That particular condition is considered part of a percentage of people are going to get it. Like it's an attack from the outside somewhere. Oh, right. It's diabetes lurking behind the bushes and it's going to jump in my
exactly.
body. And it was like, well, you did it to yourself.
Exactly.
You did it to yourself. And mostly it's a lack of knowledge about what causes it, and a bit of laziness in terms of being mindful of what you're putting in your body.
That's right.
Which I understand that. I mean, I grew up not knowing any of this stuff. And so, I was a teenager eating at McDonald's. And I've said this
Right.
before in this program, but I was so not paying attention that I had cellulite on my stomach, on the sides of my stomach at age 22.
Wow.
And I remember somebody, this woman that was a friend of mine, she pointed to my stomach because I had been making fun of like women that had cellulite on the back of their legs.
Right.
Is hilarious and kind of weird. And she goes, "Oh my God, you have it, Bob." And I was like, "Oh my God, I do." And I got mine. I got slapped down pretty hard on that one. But I was like, "Why? Why am I a 22-year-old guy?"
Wow.
And it was all lifestyle. It was all that because I don't
That's
have
right.
any of that now. I don't have it. It went away as soon
Exactly.
as I stopped eating, really junky food.
Right.
And then it was just like okay food. Now I eat much healthier than that. And so, I guess the thing is, and we're all a little bit different. We have different metabolisms and different blood types and different genetics and all these things. So, how does somebody figure out, like, let's say, okay, I'm new to this, let's say, how do I figure out how to change my lifestyle? How does some, what would you say, how does somebody begin? Let's say you haven't even begun or you've just started to pay attention to this stuff. What are some of the primary things that folks can look at in order to start improving that?
First thing I would tell people, and again, it depends on what is it they're dealing with. Are they obese? Do they have type 2 diabetes? Do they have cancer, heart disease, whatever the situation is. And assuming they're still competent, they can actually make decisions for themselves. They don't have dementia or anything. But I would say, number one, do an assessment of your waking hours. So for all of us, we automatically scratch out 6 to 8 hours of good quality sleep every night. So that leaves us with 16 to 18 hours that we're awake. And then do an inventory of your time. I mean, if you're truly a workaholic, you're working 12, 14 hours a day, which I know, unfortunately, a lot of Americans do, then obviously that's significantly cutting into your amount of time that you have left over for everything else, especially for health promoting behaviors. But if you're not a workaholic, then I would say, the standard recommendation, we'll talk about exercise for just a second. The standard recommendation, whether it's the American College of Sports Medicine, which in my opinion is the gold standard, you have other people like the American Heart Association, Institute of Medicine. I won't talk about the WHO at this point. I think WHO, we need to get out of the WHO, but that's another story. But all of these groups will typically recommend 30 minutes of exercise every day, and it should be at an intensity where you're doing something yourself. In other words, just going for a 30-minute light walk around your neighborhood is better than sitting on your couch, but it's not very stimulating in the sense of you want exercise to stimulate you in ways that help you lose weight, that modulate your immune system, that help you create hormones the way they should. I mean, there are a lot of things that come out of that. So you need to start exercising every single day, 30 minutes. I mean, unless I'm in an airplane or I'm sick or something, and you can tell I've got a little bit of laryngitis at the moment, but I try to exercise every single day. It has to be incredibly extenuating circumstances. I don't believe in the idea of, take a day off. I don't. Why? I mean, it's a 24-hour period. You have plenty of time to rest and recover. So exercise, move your body every single day. There's really no excuse for that. Number two, hydration. I think we are a dehydrated society as well. I mean, you've seen me sitting here sipping on water the whole time we've been talking today. And that's not just because I have a little bit of a hoarseness. I drink probably close to a gallon of water every day. Hydration is just so important. Find yourself a good filter, try to avoid the fluoride if you can, and drink your water every day. Now with nutrition, obviously, diet and nutrition, as you were alluding to, and it sounds like you and I kind of grew up the same way. I mean, I ate for taste. I didn't eat for health. I didn't have any role models in my family for eating healthy. I just ate whatever I wanted because it tasted good. And I drank a lot of soda and I ate a lot of fast food. And that probably explains why I was sick a lot as a kid, because I had throat infections a lot. And my sister and I were always, like every several months, we would come down with either tonsillitis or strep throat or something. And I can now look back on all of that, as they say, the rearview mirror has 20/20 vision. And I know for a fact it was mostly, if not almost entirely, attributed to our diet. But anyway, people, we get so defensive about saying, well, and I tell people a lot because I've eaten a plant-based diet for 27 years. And so my bias would be, to recommending people, even if you don't want to go completely plant-based like me, make 80% of your diet from whole plants. Like, try to avoid things as much as you can in containers. Like, try to shop as much as you can in the produce section or even frozen. I mean, people, sometimes they think, oh, frozen is bad. No, that's not necessarily bad. In fact, there have been some research that shows that when fruits or vegetables are taken out of the field and immediately flash frozen, that actually it creates a good environment to preserve the nutrition. So there's nothing wrong with eating your, frozen corn or okra or spinach or mushrooms or whatever. But try to buy your food as much as you can the way it looked, how it came out of the ground or off of a tree or something. So that way it's as natural as you can. I'm a big proponent of organic. I mean, most of the food that we buy, and I'm putting trust in the system that it's coming from a farm where it actually truly is organic. It's not genetically modified, and it's not treated with herbicides and pesticides. Those are two of the basic components of the organic standard. So I'm a big believer in that. And I mean, I don't know about you. I'm not really the kind of person. I've never been wealthy, so I don't have the ability to even if I wanted to, I don't have the ability to splurge on a lot of things. But the one area where I will choose to splurge when I can, if I can, is on my food, because I do believe that it's so important. Again, it's the most important behavior that we're going to do or utilize to either improve our health or detract from it. So, those are the kinds of things that I would tell people, right off the bat to start thinking of, and do an inventory of your time, do an inventory of how you spend your money. I mean, I hear a lot of these people talking, oh, I don't have time to exercise. Well, how much time do you spend sitting there at your desk or on your couch looking at social media or other things on your phone? How much time do you waste doing that? Because you're following whoever the most in vogue person is at the moment on social media, showing off a lot of skin or acting outrageous or whatever it is that these people do. I mean, really, how does that contribute to improving your life? So get your butt off the couch and move every day. Make more mindful decisions about the types of food that you're buying. Don't tell me you don't know how to cook. I mean, I enjoy preparing my own food. Maybe I'm a unicorn, but my mom and I go to the store. My mom lives with us. We go to the store every single week. We buy our week's worth of groceries. We bring it all home. I make meals for my family literally every day, and I enjoy it because I know exactly what I'm preparing and putting together as a meal for us that we then eat and put in our mouths, for better or for worse. But I'm doing that every single day, and I work a lot. I mean, I'm at a stage in my company's life cycle where I'm still trying to get it to a level that isn't even close to where I want to be yet. So I work a lot. We have a 4-year-old. We have another one on the way that's going to be here in a couple of months. We've got a lot of family commitments. And so, man, I still take time for my exercise and my food. And again, hydrate every day. And the other thing I think is not really in the same realm, but it's very related is, I mentioned sleep. If you have insomnia or difficulty sleeping, you've got to figure out your room. Like, do you have too much light in there? Are you exposing yourself to too much blue screen before you, actually lie down and try to go to sleep? Is it cool enough? Research has shown that the sweet spot for, even though some people I know are not, they're cold blooded, so they don't like a very cool room, but around 70 degrees is like the optimal, maybe even a degree or two lower to help us sleep well and get that proper rest And to be able to clear out all of that metabolic waste, especially in the brain creates a lot of metabolic waste during the day. So sleeping is very important. And then, and then we could talk about supplementation. I think it's important for people to know that I don't believe you can supplement your way to a good diet if you're eating at McDonald's every day. You still need good food,
Right.
because food provides so much for us. And then you supplement on top of it, like with our polysaccharides or some other things. But these are, again, to me, it's a very comprehensive approach to somebody who is completely clueless and doesn't know what to do. You have to start doing assessments in all these different categories.
Oh, you've made a great point, which is to have clarity about what you're doing and how you're spending your time. The same way you would maybe put a financial plan together, you would write things down, and I'm spending money on this and I'm doing this and this is. But if you do that with your health, it's a very valuable, even if you do it for 2 weeks, you're going to see how am I eating? How am I spending my
That's
time?
right.
Am I sleeping? Those are big things. Now, didn't you have a deadline you have to be out about?
I do, Bob. Yes.
Okay.
I've got another appointment.
Let's before we go, let's talk about your company let's promote your company, because
Thank you.
John Lewis is somebody who cares. Let's put it that way. It's very evident by today's talk.
Thank you, Bob. Anybody that wants to find me, you can go to drlewisnutrition.com. I left academics 7 years ago. I decided I was burned out on that whole process of raising money and trying to get bureaucrats at NIH and even Alzheimer's Association to appreciate what we had showed. But maybe I can come back if you would like to have me, and we can talk more about the research. But I left academics. I started this dietary supplement company. So go to drlewisnutrition.com. That's the most comprehensive source of the information. That's DR, no period, Lewis, Lewis, nutrition.com. You can find me on all the typical social media channels under that handle as well, Dr. Lewis Nutrition. And I'm happy to answer any questions, Bob. There's a lot of information there about daily brain care. That's our flagship product we created out of the research from Alzheimer's and multiple sclerosis. I'm very proud of all that work. I'm proud of the product. It helps people. And again, you can either email us or call us. We have all kinds of ways to contact us on our social media and our website. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here with you today. Thank you for your time and allowing me to talk about some of what makes me feel good about myself and trying to help other people along the way. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Let's do another episode just on the brain, because
let's do it.
If you don't have a brain, you don't have much else.
That's right. Exactly.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. I appreciate it, and I'll be in contact. Thank you.
Okay, buddy. Thank you.
Much appreciation for you folks listening to The Exploding Human. The website is theexplodinghuman.com. There's a YouTube channel where you can listen. That is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. Once again, I want to thank John Lewis for being on the show. And if you want to find out more, drlewisnutrition.com. And of course, you can find him that way on all social media platforms. Have a fantastic day. Thanks so much.